Joining the show today is one of us by way of serving 4 seasons as director of amateur scouting for your Minnesota Wild, Judd Brackett. Thanks for joining us, Judd.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
We start with this question for everybody, and you've probably got a little bit more familiarity than some of the prospects that we've pulled in recently, but first time you ever saw the unique Minnesota Wild logo, what'd you think it was?
One, love the colors, but I'm not going to lie. It took me a minute to dig a little deeper into the logo and find the Wild. I saw more, the animal than the forest in the backgrounds, but I love it. I love the colors, and obviously when we get into some of the retros, it really pops. So huge fan of the logo, huge fan of the name and the unis, and I know the players are as well.
There we go. And we usually follow that up with asking people about their nerd itch, just given Fellowship of the Rink, kind of our nod to Lord of the Rings. We know you're a nerd itch, Judd, so let's just go into it. I actually went out last summer, did a whole East Coast trip, and visited our prospect guy who runs another show for us on here, Massachusetts native. We went out to the port, and we had the first recommendation there. The scallop risotto is fantastic. Got to ask a couple of questions off that, though. And this one he asked me to come in with. Are you familiar with the existence of a podcast called Judd'z Budz? How do you feel about the name?
I love the name. I am familiar with it. It's funny because, when I first, got to Mini, my brother and others were like, wait, are you doing a podcast too? Like, what is, I was like, it's not me. Listen, if I was going to have a pod, I think my name's taken. That's where I would go. But great work there. I love the passion. I love the, informative nature of it. But of course the name is killer.
Well, hey, if you ever need to jump in and scratch that itch, you can certainly join on Judd'z Budz. That might break the internet though.
Amazing.
Second question. Now that I've gone and I've had the number one recommended dish, when I go back, what's the second best dish at the port?
You know what? For 22 years, we've never been able to take this item off the menu, despite the chef wanted it to come off, tired of making it, but the pistachio encrusted halibut is our best seller, bar none. It is every year. It's funny though, our chef's like, can we take it off the menu this year, please? I'm like, you can't. Like, we're a tourist destination, so some people are only there, a couple times, maybe once a summer, and they count on it. So we took it off, to start one summer, and the backlash was enormous. We had to have it back on the next week.
Good problems. Yeah. I mean, anything else you want to talk about as we get into the summer season and the port being a hot spot again?
No, great kickoff Memorial Day weekend. Obviously, sort of the big weekend to kick off summer. We're still waiting for school to get out, but weather's been great. Unusually unseasonably warm in Massachusetts this spring, so it's gotten people down to the Cape, and it certainly helped get a quick start to the spring.
Nice.
Well, you do have a pretty busy day job. When you're not at the scouting, you had a busy week last week, the scouting combine. And I was curious from your perspective, like, I'm sure people have their lists already before the combine. Like, what's the value of the combine? And do you have an example, maybe a player that maybe rose from those interviews or vertical jumps that you saw or whatever like that all of a sudden was like, okay, this is why the combine's here and why it fits, why it works?
Yeah, we met the week before in St. Paul to put our finishing touches on our final list together. But between now and Vegas, there'll be changes. There'll still be more discussions, and the combine is a big piece of that too. Not that there's going to be a big jumper that someone from the third round is going to jump into the first round, but we do a lot of work during the season and interviews. So we want high character, we want coachability, we want guys with some internal drive, and it's a long road, right? From being 17, 18 to when it's time to contribute for the Minnesota Wild. It's a long road, and there's ups and downs. So we want to make sure that there's stick-to-itiveness, there's coachability, there's responses, there's resiliency. So we do a lot of work during the year, but it's one more touch point at the end of the combine, right? It's only 20 minutes, but we've done a lot of work. So we generally jump into where a discussion left off during the season, maybe with a coach, maybe with the player specifically, maybe something we saw in the playoffs that we want to talk to them about, or throughout their season. And it's always great to see, the athleticism as well, right? Who's in the early stages, who's already physically mature, where their strengths are, any deficiencies maybe in the function movement of their body. But overall, it's part of the snapshot, right? We're trying to gather as much information as we can all year long, not just in the rinks, but away from the rinks. And the combine gives us one more layer for us. Look into any history on injuries. You look at, your NCAA championship this year with David Carl. That's where his health issue was discovered, was at the combine. As unfortunate as it is, but that's, it's one more chance for us to just pull back that layer a little further and make sure that everything under the hood is good.
And like they always talk about the fun or weird questions that are asked. I know the Canadians ask about what animal would you be? And like, I think the last one we heard this draft was, what's your Uber rating? I don't think that was you guys, but like,
that wasn't us.
I wasn't sure if like you probably won't share what question is kind of off the ball that you ask. If you can't share that, can you maybe describe like what you guys or teams are trying to get out of those kind of questions that are trying to maybe throw them off their mark a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important to make the player at ease a bit, right? We want to get a nugget from them. We want them to feel comfortable. It's not the rehearsed answer that they've worked on with their agent and mom and dad all week. And right, when I get asked, what's my greatest quality? What am I going to say? And I've said it, 26 times this week. We want them to feel comfortable. So if a question like that gets them to, stop for a minute, think on their own, not necessarily have a planned answer, that can help create that mood. But there's other ways to do it. Like Billy's great at it. He'll always ask guys, what they're watching on Netflix, and, just make a connection with them that, that we can then talk about what the show is, who the characters are, and kind of ad lib from there.
Like Hunter Height was just on our pod, and he told a story about on his interview, like the Billy showed up late and he came from behind a curtain and said, "Hey, what's up? Where is he?" Was that a planned part of like the whole making him think thing, or was that Billy just kind of running late from something?
Just I do remember it. I think Billy was just behind the curtain because he had to duck out quick for a call, and then it just played perfectly into his character and popped out at him. But it takes Hunter. He's like, all right, these guys are normal. I can just have a conversation with them. I don't have to, my shoulders can drop a little here and I can just have a conversation, let them, learn a little bit about me.
That's awesome. And I love your Twitter bio, Judd. Talent sets the floor, character sets the ceiling. Talk about that a little bit, though. Like, what are the most important characteristics for you as you're going about scouting all these players?
Yeah, I mean, we're a draft and development league, right? We're not drafting players and plugging them directly into our roster. So at the end of the day, we're picking a 17, 18-year-old player and projecting outward. What can they be? What do we, where do we see them fitting in our team, not just on the ice, but in the locker room too? And, our coaching staff, is our development staff, are they going to enjoy the next couple of years working with them? Are they going to have to keep and poke and prod and, pull stuff out and remind them that they need to touch base? We want guys that are committed to this process, and it's a journey, right? And like we said, there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, and we're going to share them all with them, but we want to be there to pick them up and push them, along the way. So it's really important. I do, like, there is a benchmark level of skill in order to play, but I do believe that your resiliency and your character is going to be part of what defines your ability to reach your goals.
Because I covered the Lightning for a long time, and I followed one of their amateur scouts like for a weekend, and they went through Rink net with them. They showed me kind of like different characteristics or factors that they, every team has a different priority of which is more important, like this versus this, and like a weighted factor. And I wasn't sure if, like, in general for you guys as an organization, is it like skilled in character than this, or like, like there's like probably like a weighted in different ones. Like you have to be skilled enough to be able to be drafted, but is it like the speed the next one, or is like this, size is like maybe not as maybe overrated, I guess, in certain respects?
Yeah, I think the one that's hardest to define is hockey sense, and that's probably the one you can't live without, right? You have to have hockey sense. You have to be able to insert yourself into the game, play multiple positions, understand what's happening around you. so hockey sense for me is critical. It trumps everything. It generally it's what allows someone who might be smaller or slower or maybe even less skilled to still perform because they can just process the game at a different rate. So yes, there's a baseline to everything. There's a baseline in terms of how much skating, what's the cutoff? Where are you just too slow to possibly continue to perform? But most of these things are improvable. If you want to work on it, we've seen it. There's been guys that have made major leaps in skating. And again, that's where we go back to character, right? Are you willing to put the work in? Are you willing to, to do it when you don't feel 100%, when you're sick, when you're, still trying to make that climb to the National Hockey League? So it depends upon how much that fire burns inside you and that internal drive.
What's your take on this year's draft? You talk to different experts and they say it's like a top 12 picks and then there's a little bit of a drop off. Some say there's 14, 15 guys that are in that kind of range and then there's a little bit of a drop off. Like, where do you feel about you guys at 13 of what kind of player you might be?
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot. There's as you mentioned, I think there's a couple at the very top of the draft, and then there's a very good, strong middle section of this first round. And I think we're firmly in it. I like this draft. It's interesting. I think players kind of come from all over. If you look just at the sort of under 18 age group in Hlinka or maybe even the April U18 World Championships, not everyone was there. So, when you look at the talent level, at times when you leave a tournament, you might wonder, all right, how's this going to shake out? And then you're like, okay, look at the guys playing in the NCAA. Look at the guys that were still in the CHL playoffs. I think it's a strong draft, and it's amazing how many of these guys are now starting to play in men's leagues over in Europe. It's incredible because the skill level's there, and these guys can handle it. So they're getting opportunities sooner.
What's your feel on, being able to, would you guys be interested in potentially moving up? Is there like a certain few players in that range where like, is this a draft where you're more likely to do that? Or is
we'd love to. Every year we identify sort of the lines in the first round of, where you would move up, where do you stand still, where maybe you trade back. But we'd love to. I think the problem is going to be is the teams that are in those spots are very happy with their choices that they have. Billy's very active. If we encourage him to make a call on a trade up, he's never afraid to do it. It's actually it's really refreshing. Like he'll pick up the phone and get turned down and no problem, pick it up again and call. So from that standpoint, he's very active. He'll listen to us. We'll identify it. I think the chance to move up there is going to be difficult. You have teams that have eyes on players that they like. And as you mentioned, we're 13. So if that range is 12 to 14, most teams are liking the players in their grouping.
So in that respect, is it maybe more likely you could potentially move back if you have players maybe fall that you in that same pot of players that you like?
Yeah, that's the trick of as the draft starts to unfold, there's usually a line of where you want to stand still and get a player from, and if that for some reason it the players that we're sort of eyeballing start to go sooner than we expected, then yeah, we have to make a decision on the floor there and and see if we can find a partner. It's never as easy as it sounds, right? Like we can fantasize about trades, but if you don't have a partner, nothing's happening.
Yeah, that's fair. And for you specifically, Judd, like post draft, you've got all your guys coming out of the 2024 season. How involved are you personally with that player's development moving forward? Like, do you weigh in on their development path, or are you just immediately cutting ties and you're moving on to the next crop?
Immediately they're handed over to our development staff, who are great. And they work with them. And these, like I said, there's weekly touch points with them. They're outstanding. They're out traveling, seeing the players, catching them on, at home games, road games, spending some time with them away from the rink. But at the same time, I still see them. Our amateur staff still sees them. So we still, make sure that we're checking in with them, and feedback too, right? If we happen to see a positive, negative, we're always sharing that information with our development staff too. We've got a really good relationship with the development staff. It goes back and forth. They're out seeing games too. So we want to know, not just our prospects, but when they're at a game, hey, was there anyone that stood out to you? So it's definitely a collaborative effort that way, and the flow of information is continuous.
Like, and I know you obviously still follow these guys and take a lot of pride in guys that you picked and move forward. And I was curious what your thoughts are on Rossi's development, to where I'm sure in the beginning, even for himself, there was some frustration, and people wanted him to get there right away and be the number one center right away and do that. Like, it takes some time. But like, what have you thought about his kind of progression from?
I think Marco is shown a lot of what we thought he would be. In terms of the timeline to get there. To me, that's not as important as that he's the player that we wanted him to be, expected him to be, thought he could be. You still see the same hallmarks in the hockey sense and the two-way play and the details of him, and he's always been a point producer, and he continues to be. So I think he's, performing very, very well. Obviously we've seen, he had his own health concerns, but even just the COVID effect on players and their development, it's, that draft class for some of the guys, it's been a little slower, for a top 10 group. And it doesn't mean that the high side's not there. It doesn't mean they won't achieve their potential. It just means, there was a year of lost development. So it's, the path here has a little hiccup in it for a few of them. And, you're still seeing guys really hit those marks, and it takes time. It takes time. It takes opportunity. It takes confidence. And I think that's the most, one of the most important things is watching him play and the confidence he's gaining, because with that is going to be continued growth.
I know it could be a good example. I know they're two different players, but for like a Charlie Stramel, for example, judging a guy early on versus waiting, just what's your take on where he is right now? He's always transferred to Michigan State. Like, I heard he had a tough time in Wisconsin in terms of getting playing time or being used in the right way. But what's your feel a year or so later, kind of where he's at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for Charlie's upcoming year. I'm not a huge fan of the portal in college, but I do think in Charlie's situation, this is exactly what it's for. This is someone who committed to a different coaching staff, and the opportunity situations changed. And he's had the ability to make a decision, which is great for him. He's now going to go play for his former coach. So immediately there's trust, there's confidence, and with that, it's going to be opportunity. So I'm really excited. Now he has to go do it too, right? This isn't all about what he didn't get. He's got to go out and do it. And I'm excited for him. I think he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and I'm excited for what this year looks like for him. But look, this is all part of Charlie's faced some challenges early. Some guys face them later. So this is all part of the process. The linear draft development isn't linear. So for him, he's had some, emotional challenges. He's had now some physical challenges this year. So now can we overcome all those and still become the guy that we envision? We believe so. And he's got our full support, and, we're really excited about this year for him.
Who is that guy you envision? Like, what's the profile? Like, how do you see him fitting into an NHL roster? I don't care if it's 1 or 2 years, 5 years, like when he's there, what player is he?
I mean, obviously the first thing that comes out to you is the physical nature of him, right? And it's not just the size and strength, but it's his mobility. He's got to be abrasive. He's got to be playing hard. He's got to be playing downhill on the forecheck. Charlie's game is never been a stats. He's a point of game player, right? But he's abrasive. He's hard to play against. He's an effective penalty killer. So, those guys are hard to find, especially in a 6'3", 220-pound package that moves as well as he does. If we go back to this time last year, Charlie was one of the guys who really did well at the combine, right? So he's not just a big body. He's an athletic body. So it's size, strength, compete. It's being abrasive. It's really fitting a lot of the identity that, that Bill Guerin has built here in Minnesota.
And I think I was at the draft too, and you guys talked about how much you liked him for a lot of different reasons, but also I think Guerin mentioned is filled a positional need too up the middle that's important for you guys going forward. And I was curious where you fall in general on that, like the whole debate of positional need in a system versus best player available, and like how you kind of weigh that each year, kind of based upon what's going on.
Yeah, and in the perfect where we can find the balance. We can find someone that is the best player available and fits a positional need or a size strength need or speed need. So we're always talking about our prospect pool and maybe where it's shallow and where we can make gains in a draft. but we don't want to reach too far. So we want to make sure we're still in the range of player that we think is going to be successful, and more than need, I think it's identity, right? I think there's a culture being created. There's a way, a systematic the way that Bill Guerin wants this team to play and compete every night. And so when we can find the best available that also fits that, we're going to be, we're going to jump all over that. And it doesn't happen every year. Sometimes you get, a little higher here and a little lower in one area, but overall we want to find that best, cross section of sort of identity plus best available.
And I spent some time this spring in Iowa to get a feel with the development program, but obviously new first year coach and Brett and some new assistants, and a lot of time focused on the young defensemen you have there, because you have a lot of pride in a lot of those guys. You guys took Lamboses and the Rourkes and everything else like that, and just how hard it is to be a young defenseman in this league, and having a 20 versus 21-year-old as a defensive pair partner had to be tough for them early going. Where do you feel about where those guys are in development stages, and I don't know if that affects where they are, affects what do you look at in the draft this year when you have 6 high-level D, if one falls to you, for example? How do you feel, I guess, about that group?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, goaltending and defense are the slowest developing positions. These guys need their reps. You look at Iowa, at times we had 4, even 5 first or second year defensemen playing, plus a first or second year goaltender, right? So these guys are taking on a lot of responsibility early. And I think it's important to be patient. I think you look at Lambos's draft. You got 2 defensemen picked in the top 10 before him, and I think collectively they've played 45 or 50 games in the NHL. So again, he's a rookie. He's playing his first year of pro hockey. He's doing some things well. He's learning some things. He's gonna have a big summer. I think he's a student of the game. He loves it. Now it's important for him to take the next step. Is it a huge step? Is it a medium step? That's for us to continue to evaluate and work with him on. But these guys all have, big summers ahead of them. And, and I still think, you look back the effects of COVID on some of these guys, and, when you take Ryan O'Rourke, there's no hockey in the OHL the year after he's drafted. So you can't think that didn't have an effect on his growth rate.
Look at the guys in this year's draft, and one that's maybe more polarizing than the others, or maybe scrutinized because he's been part of the process for more than any others, is Cole Yzerman. People thought he'd be a top 2 pick even a year or so ago. And then you talk to different people who are evaluators, and they say his elite level scoring, that's such a strength for his, but they wonder about him on his defensive side. And I was curious, since you probably nitpicked him just like everybody else has nitpicked him the last couple of years. Well, what's your state or feel on him as a player and a prospect at the NHL level?
Yeah, sometimes being identified early in your development can be a bit of a curse, right? You get picked over. You can liken it a bit to maybe Phil Kessel, right? Phil Kessel was sort of a guy coming in that was super highly rated, scored a lot of goals. So their paths have a parallel there between the two of them. But you can't deny, excuse me, you can't deny what Cole does. He's an elite goal scorer, has proven it at every level and continues to do so.
Got 2 more here for you, Judd, if you got time. One was our producer basically begged me to ask you about this, and then one that we close out for every interview. You got a sec? Absolutely. All right. So to lead in, our producer is from Vancouver, if that steers you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Lots of stories have been out there on what the dynamic and inner workings were. Can you just talk to me, whatever you're willing to share, about how you landed on drafting Elias Pettersson?
Yeah, I mean, we had honestly the Pettersson draft. I think is probably one of the greatest years in terms of speaking about an amateur scouting staff. We were convicted as a group, right? It started with, some of the scouts that were in Europe, with the guys that were crossing over, myself. As a group, we really just from November on, he was the guy that we just identified with on potential, on the current skill level. He was playing, in a men's league already and having success. And it was really just a matter of that we were convicted and we went through our process. That was the player that we landed on, where we landed on our list. And it certainly felt like going into the draft, based on where we had him on our list, that he would be our selection. And it, was it felt everywhere? No, like there were some other players of interest, but I honestly, as a group, and look, that's our job. We create a list. It can be ignored. It can be skipped. We can move, to a different player. That's fine. But as a group, that's the player that in our room that we wanted to pick. That when we went through our process, that's how our list was created. And really, I just, as a group, we were really proud to stand firm on it. It wasn't sort of a consensus pick. If you looked around from the mock draft, most people didn't have them in the top 10, and I get it. So there was some apprehension on it, but we as a group really felt firm on it and stuck to it. And I, to this day, it's, one of the more proud moments that, as a director of scouting.
It's a good one for the resume. That's for sure.
Well, and I think too, like for the Wild perspective, like the Ogren Urok draft could end up being like a really good one. I think for like your guys' staff. I don't know if you can recall like how it came together as far as did you wanted to pick one first, or you knew you could get maybe Urok maybe a little bit later in that draft.
So, yeah, we put our list together, but then we started to strategize, and as scouts you try to you're trying to get as many good players as you can. So the idea became can we wait on Urok and possibly come away with these two. And we just felt if in the other order, which was the way we had it on our list, if we had we felt there was less of an opportunity to come away with both players had we picked them in the reverse order.
You're not surprised that Ogren made an impact already on the NHL because he already made his debut and looked like he's.
I'm not. I mean, he's you talk about when you find that cross section of the hard skill plus the best available. Like this guy brings it all the time, and he's physically developed. He's got man strength now. He moves well. He's like I'm not surprised at all. He continues to succeed. But again, his path, right? He went from J20, then went to Allsvenskan, then to SHL. It's not a rush, right? We want these guys to be as prepared as possible so that they can be successful when they arrive, not just get there and and stick and not contribute. So we want to make sure that the development is correct, right? It's when they come that they have a chance to be successful and really impact our team.
Are you a golfer at all, Judd?
Funny you should ask. I'm not, but I am playing tomorrow. It's the manager or at one of the managers at the restaurant. It's his 40th. So he's probably for 10 years now asked me to golf. So I'm going to golf with him tomorrow. And
so you're going to drive the cart and drink beers, basically.
Pretty much. Yeah. I'll probably play two and then bow out.
Yeah, that's pretty much me on the course. Well, then we're going to twist this a little bit. We always ask our Waggle golf question, whichever one. Go to getyourwaggleon.com, drop in promo code SP10 to take 10% off the entire order. We usually ask what someone's dream golf foursome is, but I'll spin it for you and say, if you could have any three people, I don't care if it's athlete, celebrity, dead or alive, three people sit down with you and just chat, drink, eat at the port. Who are the three?
Great question for one. Being a mass guy and with the success, Bill Belichick would be one. Obviously you referred to the Saban quote, and I think Bill and Saban are share a lot of the same values. So I think the conversation would take its way. I'd probably Muhammad Ali, Belichick, and maybe Anthony Bourdain.
Okay. That'd be quite a cross section of personalities there too. Yep. So.
Yeah,
I was really hoping that you'd include Tom Brady too, just for the awkward tension between him and Bill, but respectful that you didn't. And as I asked you that and I caught you off guard, I almost have to ask now real quick. If you were an animal, what animal would you be?
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm a Cape guy and we're infested with great white sharks. So I'd be a great white apex predator. They're pretty awesome too. They're everywhere on the Cape. You can see, I mean, honestly, you don't have to go very far. Probably closer to the shore than them to be right now.
That'd be a good answer for a draft pick too. I think the people would love to hear that from a draft prospect too. So it'd be great. But thanks so much for joining us after a busy week. Looking forward to checking out the NHL Draft in Vegas, the last one that's kind of like of this kind. I think going forward, which will be weird for everybody. I think we used to having it in person for everybody. Now it'll be probably difficult for you guys to adjust to it, right? So
hopefully they reconsider. It's a great week for all of us as scouts and sort of a nice send off. But Joe, I know you have a big week ahead of yourself too. So
any day now, any day.
I wish you all the best. That'll be awesome.
Thank you. We're going to need it. We're excited. So it'll be a life changer for sure. So I will be missing the draft, but for a good reason.
Great. We'll enjoy it. It's I have 4, and it's the thing I'm most proud of is being a dad. So you're gonna love it.
Yeah, we're excited and nervous all at the same time, which I'm sure you can relate to when the day or two before. So, but always appreciate it, Jeff. Hopefully have you on again sometime, maybe during next season or something like that. So, but I appreciate you.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.